Hello, friends. Thank you all for bearing with me. Can somebody verify for me that you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Joan.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, sorry, I have so many windows open on my work computer. So let me go ahead and get this closed. Well, welcome everyone. Yes, and thank you all for bearing with me. Apparently, when everything was set up, it was set under um, my work email or my personal and not my work email. So let me see here. What is screen? Go this way. Okay, so screen one is this one. Okay. Just wanted to make sure you guys were actually watching my PowerPoint and not my um not my face. So awesome. All right. Let me go ahead and jump in here. I know I should probably take my AirPod out too so I can hear a little better. So I know we're gonna go ahead and run a little bit out of time, but that's totally okay. We have plenty of time to do so. Come on. There we go. All right. Well, welcome to the session on student engagement. My name is Shoshaunee Perez. So as we're getting started here, and again, thank you all for bearing with me a little bit. We can go ahead and do an icebreaker. So if you want to drop in the chat your name, where you're coming from, and what is one thing that you hope to learn about student engagement here while we have some time together. You can see that. So your name, where you're coming from, and what is one thing you hope to learn. Okay, I see things coming in the chat. So Tiffany from Denver, great to see Tiffany, or hear your voice or see your message. So how to keep students excited and about college and college topics. Absolutely. Oops, sorry, move my foot here. Fort Lewis, some strategies that feel easy and natural. This is always a hard topic. Yes, it is. Absolutely. Student engagement is never easy at all. Anna from Arizona, new strategies. Awesome. Sasha from Riverside, California. I want to learn some new strategies that feel easy and natural. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So keep feeling free to drop those in the chat. And we'll go ahead and get started just so since we're shorter on time than we normally are. So I do want to start out a moment with a land acknowledgement. So I am coming to you today from the land of the Lummi and Nooksack peoples here in the party to the Medicine Creek and Point Elliott treaties. We acknowledge the deep and endearing connection the Indigenous and Native peoples have with these territories in Washington state, a connection that spans generations. And recognizing this connection, we also confront the painful history of these regions, a history marked by racism, settler colonialism, displacement, genocide, coerced assimilation, and the persistent violations of tribal sovereignty. Despite these historical injustices, Indigenous and Native communities have persevered, maintaining a resilient and enduring bond with the land, air, and water. We understand that acknowledging the truth about the past is a crucial step toward building a more just and inclusive future. We acknowledge our responsibility to actively listen, learn, and speak the truth. Our commitment extends beyond acknowledgement, involves active engagement, collaboration with Indigenous and Native colleagues and community members. This engagement and collaboration is reshaping our internal policies, practices, and programs, and we will reform our external relations. We strive to work in solidarity, respecting and supporting the self-determination and resilience of these communities. By understanding the significance of this land and its history, we aim to contribute to a more equitable and just society for all. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat here. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking a moment to join me in that as well. I will take a moment to introduce myself. I know that there's at least a couple people potentially that know my name and my face. So my name is Shoshaunee Perez Show is what I go by. I currently serve as the Rally for College Program Manager At College Success Foundation, which is a nonprofit in Washington State. We also have offices in Washington, D.C. That is set to serve BIPOC students and students from low socioeconomic statuses, and to help access higher education opportunities and persist and graduate from high school as well. Part of my other title that I still love to have is I am an adjunct faculty member. So I teach first year experience, so introduction to successful learning, pretty consistently, along with some other courses for Northwest Indian College, and have for the last 7 years. I am a mom to a beautiful little girl. Her name is Brycelyn. She just turned 4. I'm an avid softball wife, and I love educational access. I'm an alumni of Northwest Indian College. I earned my bachelor's degree in 2019 in human services. In June of 2023, I earned my master's degree. Oh, that's weird. My thing is being weird. All the extra buttons. I earned my master's degree in adult education, specifically, well, higher education and specifically adult education from Eastern Washington University. I'm a direct descendant of Tulalip and Clink and Hyde on my mother's side. My maiden name is Elliott. The Campbells, the Spencers are my family. And over my history, essentially, is I have amassed about over a 12-year experience in higher education, post-secondary education, and working specifically with BIPOC communities and first-generation students. So hopefully some of that knowledge I will get to bring into this space with you all as well. Please feel free to ask questions, unmute yourself. I know we have about another 35 minutes together, and hopefully there'll be enough time for questions as well. So apparently I made this so I wanted to click just one slide at a time. So talking a little bit about what we're going to talk about for the next 30 minutes. So we're going to talk a little bit about some background and what the literature and background data says. Some things to think about when you're interacting with students, and then some engagement practices. I will also provide a list of references. I'm also open for deeper conversations, more specific about each of your scenarios. And then again, we'll have some time for questions as well. All right, so thinking first about background, more specifically about what does the literature around student engagement and higher education access, specifically around tribal communities, talk about. So first and foremost, let's talk about some perceived barriers for these students. So it is things such as difficulty leaving their homes and families, culture shock, being unprepared for academic rigor, low academic achievement, financial support, socioeconomic status of parents, right, really does play into the engagement and the connection to these students, especially considering that about 2/3, if not more, of most tribal colleges, especially their population is first generation. So not having someone back at home or back in, their guardian to be able to lean on. Low parental involvement and participation in college, but a high percentage of special education students or students with 504 or needing accommodations in college, and a belief in necessity of post-secondary education. Right, there's, for a lot of our students, speaking from experience in the work that I currently do now, I have some of my staff that work directly with students that say that they have heard things from tribal students such as, I could just go work on the boat. I don't need to get a degree to do that because I could go work on the boat and my family has a business. Why do I need to go get a degree? There's also some other perceived barriers, and this one I really want to touch on really quick a little bit more, which is individuation versus family interdependence. For most non-native students, there is this kind of concept of individuation and just going to college to be able to promote and improve their own lives. But for our Indigenous students, there is this really strong connection to family interdependence and being able to take what they are learning and bring it back into their communities and really making sure that they're taking care of their family and their community alongside of taking care of themselves and going to school as well. An internal difficulty to take risk. What if I leave and it fails? That's generally a question that we hear very often. Institutional lack of guidance, social connection, right? Especially for students that are leaving their reservations and then stepping into bigger schools. and not really being able to see themselves right externally facing immediately in that area of social connection and people that look like them. Balancing reservation life, high school preparation for college, confidence in relation to college, and we're going to touch really hard on that today as well, and also connection to historical trauma. This, I will be very transparent in saying all of these amassed from about 40 different readings and research that I did on connection for Indigenous students in going and accessing post-secondary education, which is part of the engagement piece, right? So we know that engagement with a student potentially starts before they even enter into our college settings, right? This starts in the high schools, this starts in the reservations and education, higher education programs and things along those lines as well. So some suggested solutions that were also, again, provided by the text is things such as networking to foster success. This is definitely something that is more seen, especially in high school, so more related towards starting early on. One of the things that is a huge suggestion is to start bringing high school students into the fold of the college curriculum and classroom and allow students to network and connect with those peers that look just like them, that have experiences that are similar to theirs, in order to allow them to feel, again, that connection to the community and to the space that they are potentially going to be going to. Some sort of immersion program, so some sort of summer bridge camp is also another way to engage and to help students to create access, develop positive and trusting relationships with college. And this really goes to the fact within the research, there was a lot of things that were said in terms of high turnover rates in post-secondary education, and a student developing a relationship with someone that may travel to their reservation or show them the school, but then all of a sudden that person just does not work for the school anymore or is not able to be reached. We know, and really we know from research and from data, that students really, especially Indigenous students, really thrive on that one-to-one deep connection rooted relationship within relation to access to higher education. And that relationship in and of itself is extremely vital to engaging the student and getting the student to persist and retain through their degree as well. Campus social supports, social events to retain students, tribal supports, especially bringing in, if you are in a community that's close by, bringing in tribal supports, especially if you have students that are experiencing potentially mental health challenges. Bringing in traditional culture and values and traditional ways of healing is also a really great way to help engage students and help them through their process. A college going attitude by high school counselors, bringing in family support, which includes bringing in the family into future planning. So one of the things, I used to be the first year experience advisor for Northwest Indian College, and bringing in the student and their family support system, their nebulous support system. And I really want to kind of bring that part into it. So their support system. So that does not have to be mom or dad, but allowing whoever it is that is their support system to also be at the table with them when you're having these conversations is also extremely important and a really great way to engage. And then also to kind of almost in a sense, hold the student accountable to if you have some tasks that they need to do once they leave your office, to bring them and have that kind of accountability piece. Bringing culturally relevant supports and resources. And then I also included some things such as summer preparatory programs, such as American Indian College Fund Pathways, College Horizons, and other bridge programs that are also currently in existence. So we talked a little bit about what the literature says. So what research has already been done. Let's talk a little bit more about data specifics, right? Because it's extremely important to understand, and I also tell my students this when I teach them, it's extremely important to understand where we are today in order to kind of think about some of our engagement practices or the things that we want to change. So first and foremost is talking a little bit about graduation rates. So starting in high school. So there's about a 75% graduation rate in the US for Indigenous students, which is about somewhere between a 25 to 36% dropout rate for students between 7th and 12th grade. So, right, so that means that about a quarter of our students, if not 2/3, about a third of our students is not making it to graduation. And that can also, right, we can have different conversations about systemic issues and engagement specifically in high school rather than post-secondary as well. There's two different types of engagement, right? This one is the adjusted cohort graduation rate for students by race in 2019 and 2020. So specifically looking at the graduation rate for American Indians. So again, 75% of the students graduating from high school. This I'm gonna put a circle on the screen. So this table very specifically shows the percentage rate for Indigenous students graduating with a bachelor's degree at a post-secondary institution. This only does go through 2016. Of course, one of the things we know about education specifically is that data takes a while to get to us. I do want to highlight one positive here because not the landscape of this is not grim in all of the aspects. But if you take a look here, we're noticing that there is a steady increase in students graduating with bachelor's degrees in Indian country, which is amazing. Because that means that there's something that you all are doing or we all are doing together that is working very well, that we just have to think about some of those practices and moving forward. Again, also talking about first generation rates because first generation is one of the very large identities that our students bring into the classroom spaces and into the collegiate spaces as well. 64% of Indigenous students identify as first generation. So again, almost 2/3 of our incoming populations at our colleges identify as first generation. So if we think about that, you know, from this space here, we have 13. So we're looking at least four, if we were all students, at least 4 students. Actually, it's more than that because my brain is not working. So we're looking at like 7 or 8 students or 7 or 8 people in this space would identify as first generation. So what does that mean though, when we talk about being first generation? We know the definition, right? So neither parent has received a bachelor's degree. But what does that mean with what the experiences and things that the students are bringing into these spaces and into these college spaces that can also seem as a lack of engagement, right? So there's a fear of the unknown. What is this going to mean for me? What does this look like? How do I do this? That also, right, we talked about that at the very beginning, that there is a lack of support outside of the classroom for these students. Now, that is not to say that places such as the Centers for Student Success or the tutoring centers or disability accommodation centers or the Native American student unions are not support networks, but outside of the support networks and systems that exist inside the school itself, these students oftentimes do not have that support network at home. There's a lack of preparedness for these students because, again, there is not these conversations that are happening at home and potentially in their school bases to talk about if they go or when they go to college. It's more conversation of if at all, even that these students may have that conversation. And it is also, in terms of data points, it is also important to know that these students, first generation students, are more likely to leave college after their first year than any other student that exists in these spaces. So it's super important for us to think about, especially when it comes to engagement. It's also important, I will share this. So again, as I mentioned, I teach a first year experience course. Joan, I also work with Joan as well when I worked at Northwest Indian College and still do today. And one of the questions that I tend to ask my students, and then Joan has also come and given presentations in my class. So the question I always ask my students is, what is your definition of success? In this capacity, what would you define as you being successful? Oftentimes, a lot of times we see things such as things being driven by value, a way to get back to their community, some sort of reciprocity, even just making it through a quarter for these students is a view of success. A follow-up question that is also oftentimes that we ask our students in my classroom as well is, why did you choose to go to college now? And just as we mentioned at the very beginning, it is all very much driven by giving back to their community and being able to enhance their community in a much better fashion than when they left it. And so really helping to keep that concept and idea at the forefront, at the center of our work. And when you're having conversations with students, will help for them to connect much deeper to the things that you were saying. And really, sometimes, even when I was an advisor, I would ask this very specific question to my students that potentially were coming in and seeming that they were somewhat disengaged. Um, is what is success to you? What does success look like for you in this setting? And a lot of times, again, in that instance, I would get just making it through this quarter and passing my classes. So students were very much not future thinking in years, but they were future thinking in months. And so taking and revisiting that conversation at a month, at a quarter or a semester basis, depending on what your school looks like. I don't know. There it goes. So some things to think about when we're thinking about these students. So when I was graduating with my bachelor's degree, I participated in story sharing sessions with a variety of different people that worked in academia, specifically higher education, and worked specifically with Indigenous groups and populations. And students, or not students, I asked these people that worked with these students, what do you see in terms of students not wanting to access education or not wanting to stay? One of the quotes that was shared with me was, most Native students I have encountered are not able to have future thinking, but instead are usually in survival thinking. It makes it difficult to think about going to school when you're worried about surviving. Makes it difficult to think about going to school when you're worried about surviving. Another thing that I've also heard before as well, that was a little bit more in relation to students experiencing homelessness and students that are come from foster care backgrounds, is school for most students in this instance can also be seen as a back burner option. It is an option to get what they need to survive, but they aren't necessarily there to learn. And so it's important to really think forward to what is the need that needs to be met for this student in order for them to be engaged and be in the classroom and to be able to think. Because sometimes it's just something as simple as the extra, it's not, and I guess it's not simple. It's something such as an external need not being met, such as secure housing, safety, food, money, a job, children, right? All of these external factors that come in as well. Among this, some of the other things that were shared with me during this as well was a lack of familial conversations, so family dynamic around going to college, academic underpreparedness, state requirements for teachers, school retention for schools, or state retention for schools and districts, financial barriers for the fear of students. And this is something that is still rings very true. A lot of students do not want to go to college and become in debt for things that they cannot fund, or the debt that they cannot pay back, because they simply, again, are worried about surviving. And so really ensuring and having early on conversations about financial stability is extremely important, especially when working with Indigenous students. Shock, a push for apprenticeships. There's a huge push across the nation, and what we're hearing from high school students now is, why would I go to college when I could just go into an apprenticeship and start making money right away? So the ability to connect college and a job, or to help students see towards the end of that, those potential 4 years that they may spend in school, and what that is going to actually financially do for them. The want to survive, again, poverty inhibits future thinking. Was a phrase that was shared with me. Poverty inhibits future thinking. If you are worried about surviving and where you're going to sleep that night and what meal you're going to eat that day, and if you're going to have enough dollars, especially with the cost of inflation, to even just go get a cheeseburger so you can eat and do your homework, or even be able to go sit in Starbucks to potentially have access to Wi-Fi, you're going to go with the immediate need first. A fear of not belonging. Gen Z is an era of instant gratification. Gen Z, the students that are currently in high school now and getting ready to exit high school, they are an era of instant gratification. So if it takes long for them to see the fruits of their labor per se, it's going to not be something that they might not be nearly as interested in. The culture versus education. Can I find a way to blend the two together? Can I find a way to bring my culture into my classroom where somebody understands what I'm talking about? And a utopian concept. So some tips to engage students, right? The meat and potatoes of why you all came to this session to hear me talk. So first and foremost is to acknowledge their struggles while understanding your own personal bias. Acknowledge their struggles while understanding your own personal bias. So I wanted to share a very kind of brief scenario. So I I'm not shy in saying I thought I was potentially one of the more woke and understanding individuals when I started working in higher education. I am a second generation college student. My mom was the first in my family to go to college, albeit not teaching me, to me or my sisters to do that, and went when we were much older. And so I thought I understood where students were coming from. And I attended a conference, a NACADA conference in Kentucky, in Kentucky. And I went to a session on understanding your own personal bias and how it relates to education. And in that hour and a half session, which I think is how long that was, I had never had more of a come to realization moment about the own personal bias that I was carrying while I was doing work with my students, such as phrases that would pop into my head, such as, well, my mom was a single mom with 3 kids. Why she could do it, you could do it too. That's not necessarily the case. And so recognizing your own personal biases or your own personal understanding of what it means to go to college and understanding our privilege within inside of that, if you have made that journey into post-secondary education, is extremely important to these students. But also acknowledging their struggles, because oftentimes if they have created a trusting relationship with you as an adult, you are often the first person they are coming to with some sort of struggle. And so if you are working to have some sort of conversation with a student and you bypass the fact that they talked about that they are looking for stable housing because they're looking at being evicted, and you only focus on the fact that they're not passing their classes, that student is less likely to come back to you the next time around because that you didn't hear them out. They didn't feel that you heard them out. They only feel that you heard about their degrees. So acknowledging their struggles. Again, asking your students to define what success looks like to them. This I really use as kind of a common ground method when working with students. Because if I can understand what their definition of success is, that allows me to help them set goals and celebrate their successes when they meet whatever that definition of success is. So again, right, students that might not be future thinking about if making it to the end of the quarter with simply a passing grade so they can continue to have their scholarship for their next quarter was what their definition of success was to me at the beginning of this quarter. When I meet with them for the following quarter, we take a look at that and we use that as the basis of our conversation to celebrate that success and celebrate how they got there. Teach the hidden curriculum. Teaching the hidden curriculum can look different for many of us. However, many of these students that are coming into school, especially Indigenous students, first generation students, don't know how to navigate these systems. And most often are spending time fumbling around or just as afraid to ask to help navigate these systems and may potentially drop out or disengage because they don't know how to navigate it. So using common terminology, sometimes it always felt like over explaining something and checking to make sure that the student understood. But talking about things about what your satisfactory academic progress policy looks like. If you have a suspension policy for things, where can a student go to get a meal if they need one, or to find ways to access different materials that may look different than what you think they already know. Because sometimes these systems are not, or this curriculum or these things that students should know are not things that they know at all. And when they try to go and access these systems, or when they try and go to be part of this, or they're struggling, students just don't know how to do that. And they're afraid to ask because they don't want to seem that they don't fit in. It's right. It's that connection of imposter syndrome. One of the things as an educator that I do for students when I teach, very specifically, is I have a handout that is called Student Resources. And I have every single student resource that I know of, could physically find, whether talking to my team, to the staff at the college, such as Student Connections, the tutoring center, mental health resources, community food resources. And I have it as a document and I share it at the very beginning of my class. It's the first thing that my students see on their Canvas page when they click on modules. And when I work with students who may not be being successful in their class, I always attach it, because then a student does not have to ask me or feel that they have to ask me for support. It's just there. It's there for them to utilize should they need it. Create empowerment through growth mindset and self-efficacy. Celebrating successes, whether large or small. Turning an assignment in on time or early. Graduating, celebrating those successes alongside of your student is extremely helpful for keeping them engaged and keeping them connected. And meet students and their families where they are. Sometimes that means meeting at a coffee shop or having conversations over the phone. One of the places that I tend to meet my students where they are, essentially, I meet my students a lot of time in text message, because students have a question sometimes on the weekends and they're able to text me and ask a question, whether it's related to homework assignments or school policy that they need to have answered. So meeting students and their families where they are, and also just kind of taking a gauge of what students feel or are already understanding. Every student that, when I was an advisor, every student that walks into my office was at a different place in space of their knowledge and skill set. And so not having the same canned spiel that I was going to give to every student, but listening to the student and hearing what they wanted to say and growing and developing those skills and growing and developing that conversation from there. I want to touch a little bit more on self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a new terminology or phrase that is kind of growing a little bit more in popularity around the country. So self-efficacy really is defined as a belief in oneself to succeed in very specific situations. So it's not self-confidence, because self-confidence is an across the board belief in oneself. Self-efficacy is based in situational aspects. So a student's self-efficacy in a math class could be very much different than their self-efficacy in an English class per se. And so working with students to kind of have and filter through some of these conversations is extremely important. There are 4 very specific ways that are defined for building self-efficacy, such as mastery experiences, obviously. So a little bit more self-explanatory: students trying something, succeeding, getting a good grade, getting some sort of acknowledgement that they did well, and then they will continue to repeat the process and their self-efficacy will grow. Vicarious experiences. So again, that's where the connection of mentorship and networking comes across as well. So students being able to see someone who they connect with on some sort of level. So a single mom with children seeing another single mom with children being able to be successful in the fields and places that they want to be successful in as well, is a really great way for a vicarious experience. Verbal persuasion. This is where you all come in great hands and great support. Again, just building those students up and using positive words and phrases and helping them to process through the barriers and things that are in front of them is also a really great way to help build their self-efficacy. Along with emotional and physiological states, right? Our brain and our body have to be working together and have to be in good spirits in order for us to continue to build our self-efficacy. There is also a little bit of groundwork being done in this capacity, which is the 5th experience, which is called imaginal experiences. The best way that I can find to explain this is I take my first year students on a journey. When I talk, and I teach self-efficacy in my first year class so that students can understand this concept and this idea and work on building it for themselves as well. Is I tell my students, I have my students close their eyes, and I tell my students and explain with detail them walking across the stage and earning their degree. And I have students that will come out of that moment crying, saying that they can hear the sound, smell. For the college that I work for, the graduation is based around the water, being able to smell the water and hear the sounds and the feelings and shaking someone's hand. And for some of those students, that was the first moment that they really felt that they could do what it was that they set out to do. And have watched that experience or participating in that experience with the students that I'm teaching. For students who may have been disengaged and really not wanting to turn in work or ask questions in class, I have watched that flip a switch for a student, and they feel more connected to the work that they're doing and are being engaged and are staying connected in the classroom space and outside of the classroom space. Here are some more tips based around from the University of Washington, based around some class-based work. So if you are an educator, so some collaborative learning. So students can gain confidence by observing their peers working through challenges. So whether that's, for example, if you have a student writing a scholarship essay, or they're working on giving an opportunity for students to do group work together so that they can process through challenges together. Doing progress-oriented assessment, so comparing students' performance against stated goals rather than each other. Quick win or low stakes assignments, and early in the term to build students' confidence. So one of the ones that I did this quarter with my students was we went over the syllabus our first day of class, and then we took a quiz in class for students to get points for their syllabus, and we walked through that quiz together. And as long as the student participated and did the quiz, it was an easy assignment, or not an easy, it was a quick win assignment for them. So they were able to get the points for that. Self-reflection and self-assessment activities. I start my class every single day with a self-reflection question. I usually will tie the self-reflection question to the concept or topic that we are talking about, but I give my students somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes, depending on the question, the quote, or the video that we watch, to reflect, and then we have open floor conversation, allowing students to talk about things such as, what is your upside down bucket list? What is something you accomplished recently that you are extremely proud of? How do you work on creating your self-care? So it allows students to have very consistent self-reflection. And then also using self-reflection as weekly assignments, so doing kind of more of a self-assessment, so students are able to gauge where they are in their progress and adjust from there as well. And then frame failure as part of the learning process to reduce anxiety. I always share the story of the number of students that come to me or came to me as an advisor and said, I'm sorry, but I have to quit my classes. I'm sorry, I have to withdraw. My first response to those students was, there's nothing to be sorry for. I'm very proud of you for coming to me with that. And are not proud. I'm very thankful that you came to me with that. And we are always going to be here when you're ready. Right now, there's something else that is a little bit more important that needs to be taken care of. But there is absolutely no shame in stepping away and coming back when you're ready. There's no shame in stepping away and coming back when you're ready. Utilizing, because a lot of time, the reason that the student is apologizing is there's shame. Because withdrawing or disengaging from school or academics is viewed as a failure, but it's not. It's just viewed as a pivot and an opportunity to come back when they feel, again, that they are surviving, that they're past the point of just surviving. And share words of encouragement with students. So we have about 2 minutes left. So I'm going to say, are there any questions? But I'm also going to put my contact information up here in just a second. There's my references. Are there any questions that anyone has? See it here in the chat. You're welcome, Joan. any questions? You're welcome, Ariel and Ariana and Sasha. I know people are just putting thank yous. There's not really any questions that are coming about, but this is my contact information. I'm more than happy to have very direct, concrete discussions about student engagement around your specific population. I know, again, each individual population and work students that you're working with is different based on each individual group. But I'm more than happy to have those conversations. That is my work email. My phone number, you're more than welcome to call or text me. You can also, I do have LinkedIn and things like that as well, where there's different options for that. So with that, there's about 1 more minute left. And I will hang back if there's any other questions. But I really want to thank you all for hanging with me through the technological difficulties. And I hope that you were able to find this session helpful. And I look forward to hearing from all of you. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your conference.